very fortunate and pleased and welcome. Last meeting we had Commissioner Simmons came up and give us a lot of information, and it's always good to have our highway commissioner up and tell us what's going on. And today we have our executive director, Mr. Brad White, to come up and kind of tell us some more information, what's going on and what's being planned and what's planned at MDOT for Madison County. Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here with Commissioner Simmons. It is a pleasure to work for him. I've had the opportunity to be around government most of my career, and he does a really good job of representing not only the interests of his district but statewide, so I hate I wasn't able to be here with him. What I was asked to do is give a recap of the past legislative session and how we fared with that. And, it's always popular to say government should run like a business. But most of us that have been around government know that it doesn't always work that way, because businesses and government have totally different setups. But with the Department of Transportation, we're a little unique in that I believe we can run like a business. We have an elected board of directors that sets policy. We have a CEO that runs the agency. We have a staff of people that work on developing a product that's delivered to a consumer, and we're graded on our ability to deliver that product and the quality of that product. So when I was brought back to MDOT as director, we realized that one of the things we needed to do to enhance our ability to deliver the product to the taxpayers of the state was building a better relationship with the legislature. And I've always viewed for lack of a better way of putting it, the art of legislating as kind of like scaling a mountain. You go up as high as you can and stake a flag with the intention of coming back next year and picking up where you left off and trying to go even higher. But before I get into what we did, I think it would be important briefly to tell you a little bit about the way we function. While we are a state agency, we implement a federal program. And so all of the resources that we use to work on the roads and bridges, highways, interstates around the state, we have to spend the money generated through our state fuel tax and other special funds first. And as the Federal Highway Administration is able to ascertain that we've followed their rules and their regulations, then they reimburse us with the federal money that's assigned to the state of Mississippi. So we run a reimbursement program, basically, to try to implement our stuff. So it is important to recognize that all of that comes with strings attached. And so when we're implementing the federal program, a lot of it goes to maintenance, a lot of it goes to safety. The commissioners have very little discretion, contrary to what people believe, in how those funds are put out. And luckily, the last time the Federal Highway Administration was reauthorized, they're reauthorized by Congress every 5 years. Senator Wicker served in the ranking Republican role on the Commerce and Transportation Committee at the time, and he, along with the work of Congressman Thompson in the House, was able to get Mississippi another $1 billion in that 5-year authorization of federal funds. And with that, the Commission was able to restart our capacity program. And so the two main things that we do that most of the people see is our maintenance, our upkeep of the existing system that the taxpayers have. That's about a $66 billion asset, 31,000 miles of highway, over 500 and something bridges around the state. And then, of course, trying to implement the capacity program, which is used to add efficiency to the system, to turn a 2-lane into a 4-lane or a 3-lane into a 6-lane or a bypass or whatever necessary to allow our system to continue to grow in its ability to safely and efficiently carry the volume of traffic that is currently on that roadway. And so we were able to begin that back thanks to this new investment of federal money. So we came back to the legislature. It was with all of this backdrop that I just covered to try to convince them of ways that they could deal with our appropriation that would allow us to run like a business. In other words, no earmarks in our special fund. Allow us to play that shell game of sorts to be sure that we're maximizing all the federal money that's made available to us so that we can go further. In the last 3 years that we've done that, each year we've been able to go back to the Federal Highway Administration and ask for additional obligatory authority from states that did not do as good of a job in managing that. And this past year we were able to get $100 million extra roughly in extra obligation authority. But beyond that, we began conversations with the legislature about how they can step in and fund or assist us in funding these various different areas. This past session, we had a budget that was approved of about $1.5 billion. Roughly $800 million of that is federal money that they authorized us to use. We have $10 million that they put into a new strategic multimodal fund that's there to help the ports and waterways, railroads, and airports around the state. They have assisted us in giving us the match money, if you will, the $40 million a year to draw down the additional $200 million I was talking about that we were able to receive from Federal Highway Administration. And then they became interested in trying to assist us in moving along this capacity program, the big projects around the state that have quite a hefty price tag. And as they were talking about using one-time money, we were fortunate enough to convince them that the logical way to do that was to, instead of putting one-time money on a reoccurring expense, to allow us to give them our list of projects in the order that they would become ready around the state, and for them to infuse one-time money, if that's what they chose to do, into that program, allowing us to try to get projects off of that list with the hope of ultimately being at a place where the money that we're able to put in through our regular budget could cash flow the program.
Right.
Last year, they gave $450 million. That was able to knock the first 6 projects off the list, and we began this past year in awarding those projects and just awarded another one this past commission meeting. This year, they gave us $250 million. That was able to knock off the next 2 on the list, so we've gone 8 projects down. The significance of that for Madison County is your I-55 project is now the next one on the list that would be ready. To give you an update on that, we're in the middle of the value engineering phase of it. We'll be hopefully beginning to finalize the design in the next couple of months. We'll move on then to purchasing what right-of-way would be needed, as well as any utilities that may have to be moved. You can rest comfortably that Commissioner Simmons has already allocated the funds to do all of that. So all of the money for this project that will be needed to bring it to construction ready has been designated, and we will begin moving that project to there. The money to construct it, however, is a different story. So in keeping with what I mentioned earlier, where we staked the flag this last time, this next session we hope to come back to the legislature and begin the conversation anew to try to secure additional funds that will allow us to go further down that list, hopefully grabbing the Madison County project and those that come thereafter. But if I may, Mr. President, while I'm at the podium, I want to take a minute of personal privilege just to say that's not really an ideal way to run a construction program. And where I could use, or we could use, the help of the boards of supervisors, not just here in Madison County, but around the state, our municipal officials, all of us that have an interest in carrying out our infrastructure, what the Department of Transportation needs is recurring revenue.
Right.
You can't run a construction program on one-time money when you don't know what you're going to have the next year. And so it's been since 1987 that the legislature looked at modernizing or adapting, amending the funding model for the then highway department. And so we were hopeful that we would begin that conversation this session, and I do think we made a little progress in trying to convince our legislative leadership that it's time again to do that, because sooner or later the one-time money is going to run out. And what we have to be able to do is to have a dedicated stream of revenue that we can budget for and count for and know how to cash flow then the projects, just like this Madison County project. Ideally, we wouldn't be going back to the legislature every year with our handout, but we would instead have a stream of revenue that could be done, I believe, without raising taxes within the existing budget of the state, that would allow us to properly budget for this and take care of these needs. Because here's the threat that we're facing now. We're required federally to take care of the existing system. So maintenance will be addressed if at all possible. And the commission was faced with this about 15 years ago, and they had to shut down the capacity program in order to divert all available funds over to the maintenance program. And this commission is now faced with that again. Luckily, due to the money that we've received from the legislature and the extra funds, we're not going to have to shut the whole program down as it was done 15 years ago. But there will be some projects that we'll be taking off the list in order to free up the funds necessary to hopefully be able to cash flow, if necessary, projects like the I-55 in Madison, to be sure that we're financially equipped to continue moving those projects that we've brought so close to being construction ready. So we do have a plan moving forward, but hopefully we can have a collective voice that can begin to explain to our legislative leadership and move the needle in trying to address this core function of government. I've said before, it doesn't matter how good your health insurance is if your ambulance gets stuck in traffic on the way to the hospital. And it doesn't matter how much money you're putting in our public schools if the school buses can't cross the bridges on the way there. So hopefully we'll see a move in further adapting to this core function of government. But it is a team spirit. And with that, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, Mr. President, I appreciate your involvement over the last session. I think I spoke to you more than any other supervisor in the state, with the exception of Lee Caldwell, and I think that's because she sleeps with one of our commissioners. But I appreciate.
By the way, that's her husband.
That is her husband. I'm sorry.
We want to make sure we.
I appreciate your involvement and your ability and willingness to be engaged in trying to move the needle with our leadership and having the conversations necessary. I see Ms. Hester here. Claire has forgotten more about the legislative process than most people ever know, and she has a lot of clients that interface with the Department of Transportation, and I appreciate their willingness to work with us to try to have a cooperative effort, because I do believe that a rising tide raises all ships, and by the help that y'all gave us and others like you from the other counties, we've been able to continue to receive the money to continue the capacity program and keep it alive as long as possible. So I appreciate that. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I'm not going to get over in Commissioner Simmons' territory about specific projects, but I'll be happy to get you the answer. But if I left something out in regard to our budget or how that works or what to expect with the programs that we're implementing, I'm happy to cover that.
I would say that, yes, you and I talked 2 or 3 times a week the last couple of months, you know, working together to try to find the money or try to get the money to for the Interstate I-55 widening,
right,
from 463 to Gluckstadt. And appreciate your patience with me, because I know we talked a lot, bet, and but we did make progress.
Very much so.
You know, with our lobbyists as well, you know, being involved, trying to help as well to move the needle, because it takes all of us to do that. And this project, I think the last I heard, the cost was about 110 million.
Well, right now we're looking at about 130 million.
Yeah.
It's expected to be ready to be advertised for construction in the spring of '26. So we do have another legislative session that, like I said, I hope we can pick the flag up and go further up the mountain, to use that analogy. And I believe we can. I do believe it's on everyone's radar, and I believe everybody sees the importance of maintaining a good transportation system as it relates to economic development and every other function of our life.
Right. So,
Brad, do you think, I was reading a press release about this I-55 project from March of 2023, and it was actually from the governor, and it mentioned $65 million for the widening. So the price has now jumped to, you said 130.
So one of the issues that we're dealing with is the cost of doing our business has continued to increase. I'll give you a perfect example. 3 years ago, the legislature was going through our 3-year plan, and they decided to give us about $50 million for paving. And that was not an arbitrary number that they picked out. They saw that of the 4 paving programs we ran, one of them, the projects listed, came to about $50 million a year. So they gave us $50 million with the thought being, we'll let you escalate a whole extra year within that one program. They passed that in April. By the time we got the money in July, we escalated about 3 projects. Because what happened right after the Federal Highway Administration was reauthorized and we started receiving the extra money that we were able to restart the capacity program with, was inflation hit the national economy. And our ability to do business was greatly hampered by all of that. The price of asphalt went through the roof. The price of labor went through the roof. And so while we were seeing the same amount of money being put into our maintenance program, for example, you're seeing a fraction of the projects being built. But that's another reason why we need a new funding model that can give us recurring revenue that we can plan for and budget for in order to be able to adjust things for stuff just like that. That press release you're mentioning, he got that number from me. And so that was an accurate number a few years ago. The DeSoto County project, for example, when I first came back to MDOT, it was about 115 million. Now it's at about 160-something million. So there's different factors that go into that with each project, but it is a problem, and it is more of a reason why we need to adequately address our funding needs and our funding model.
So to get this project funded, we're either going to have to find a recurring revenue or go to the legislature and get them to allocate money.
Our conversations with the legislature, there are two ways that Federal Highway Administration will allow you to move forward. You have to be able to have all the money up front to show that you're going to be able to start the project and complete the project. Or you have to have a revenue stream that you can show you will be able to cash flow that project through the duration of the project's life. You know, I believe that it's much more manageable and makes more sense to have a smaller amount annually that you can cash flow with that's recurring revenue than the one-time money, because what we have now is a bunch of money that's sitting in the bank waiting to be spent because that money, as you know, is spent out just over time. So that's another reason I believe recurring revenue would be the way to go. But that is the only two options that we would have. Now, we are pursuing federal grants. We are pursuing federal earmarks for all of our projects like that. But those do not come in the amount that would complete a project. They would only come in amounts that would enable us to maybe have a better chance of narrowing the gap that we had in the funding to try to bring it to fruition.
All righty.
Yeah, also, I'm sorry, anything else, Supervisor Baxter?
No.
Okay. Also, you know, we kind of caught in the same situation with our three projects on the south end with Bozeman, Reunion Crossing, and Phase 3. When we started that program, it was around 50 million, and now it's around 120, 125 million. And so we had to back up and regroup and see how we could save $1 million, you know, just to help save and do those projects. But also, kind of speaking back to the I-55, I know a lot of mine of your conversation, our lobbyist conversation, especially within the last 3 weeks of the month of the session, we was hoping that we could get $500 million. And with that $500 million, it would have not only done our project, but it would have done the top four.
Rankin County's project, yeah. If you recall, that's what our strategy that we were trying to work was give us what you gave us last year.
That's exactly
And
right.
had they done the 450, I believe this project would have been accounted for, and the Highway 25 project in Flowood would have been accounted for. But, you know, we're not going to give up. We're going to pick up next year and come right back at it. The good news is, and I do think that this goes into a lot of their thinking, and I can't argue with it, that if you're using one-time money, you're looking at when these projects are scheduled to be able to be awarded and advertised. And they went as far down the list as they would get with projects that they could not come back and address next session. In other words, they would be beyond their schedule come January of '25. So Madison and the Rankin County projects we're mentioning that are now the top two on the list, if they will address it in the session of '25, either by adjusting our funding formula or by direct appropriation, then we're way ahead of schedule in having the money lined up in order to build the project.
And that's very well said, and I'll say it again. You know, even though our project widening did not get funded this year, but we made good progress by working with them because they did fund the two projects you was talking about up north.
Right. By
So-
getting those out of the way,
Yeah,
it
and
raises
so,
everybody's project up the list. And I'm very grateful that the legislature's been willing to do that,
Yes.
because there would be a temptation to cherry-pick projects. But
Right.
much to the leadership of the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor and the influence of the Governor, they've applied a pretty common-sense approach. Let's fund what's next and just keep moving down the list and take politics out of it. So I am appreciative of that.
That's it. So we did, all of us did make progress in this, and so we are listed as the top list on the capacity projects for next year. But the work is still there to be done, really starting now to January.
Correct.
I mean, that's when a lot of the work will be done between now and
Absolutely.
January.
Absolutely.
And so that's where, our lobbyists will definitely be involved to hopefully ensure come January, all of our representatives know what we're asking for and why.
Well, and I would
Why-
appreciate that. This is a team sport, as I said, and the more people we have working together, and that was one of the things I was proud of with this. You had the counties and cities involved that had projects on the list. You were all working together to try to advance the program, knowing that if we could advance the program, it moves everybody.
That's
And I
right.
think as we continue to do that, then we'll get where we want to go.
Very good point. Always, we appreciate you, as always, being
Thank you.
helpful to Madison County. I know you live here in Madison County, and
Casey's my supervisor.
and you get to travel in some traffic as well as the rest of us, that we are hopefully on down in our agenda, that we will start resolving a lot of this a lot quicker.
We'll do our best. I grew up in Simpson County and traveled Highway 49 through Rankin County, and then moved to Madison County, and then they fixed Highway 49.
Yeah.
So now we got to work on it.
Well, we're hoping that's going to happen up here with I-55. We're going to fix it, and you just stay in Madison
We're
County.
going to get it
and
done.
Move on. Thank
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. White. Appreciate it. Next on